Your husband broke route, wrecked the aircraft, and died doing it. That isn't heroism, it's incompetence. You didn't come for truth. You came hoping grief would turn his mistake into a $480,000 payday. He lost control and left you a funeral. Calling it sacrifice won't make it anything but operator error. The tears, the card, the Loyal Wife Act, save it for the memorial. It won't buy you a claim. He paid for a stupid decision with his life. We won't reward his failure, or yours. Claim denied. Take the card and go.
Curtis thought he had crushed a grieving widow. He had no idea his arrogance had just set his own downfall in motion.
But to understand how it came to this, we need to go back 10 minutes. Before insurance claims, Director Curtis Selby dropped his polite mask and showed Nora exactly how little he thought of her. The claims office opened at 8, but by 8:10, the fluorescent lights already felt tired. A printer coughed in the corner. The vending machine hummed without cooling anything. Nora Rourke sat across from Curtis Selby with a manila folder resting squarely on her knees. Wait. To understand why a dispatcher eventually forced an entire claims unit into review, go back 41 seconds before that file closed. Nora had worked the radio desk at Karma's Bend Helibase for 10 years. 3 weeks earlier, Boone Rourke had gone down during a fire mission over Ninnebark Ridge. For 11 years, the two of them had paid into a supplemental aviation death policy. The number printed on the first page was $480,000. At home, the funeral invoice still sat beneath the sugar bowl. The mortgage statement leaned against the toaster, unopened. Selby skimmed Boone's information sheet with the side of his thumb. "A seasonal helicopter jockey," he said. Nora lifted her eyes. "Type 1 pilot." The tip of Selby's pen touched the desk. Tap. The radio girl from Karma's Bend would know, I suppose. Tap. Nora placed both hands flat on the folder. Her wedding ring was not on either hand. Selby turned to the benefit page. His pen stopped beside the number. $480,000. He leaned back. More than your husband would have cleared in a good many fire seasons. He did not look at the funeral certificate clipped behind it. "What I don't understand," he said, "is why a wife would rush a claim before the accident report is complete." At the side desk, Priya's chin dipped. Her blue lanyard wound once around her index finger, then twice. The man waiting by the wall studied the cracked leather across his left shoe. The dead vending machine screen held his reflection, but his hands stayed folded between his knees. Nora said nothing. Selby slid a form from beneath the policy. 3 lines had already been typed. Internal code, OE7. Basis, failure to maintain control. Exclusion cited, willful deviation from assigned flight path. The operator left his assigned route, Selby said. That decision belongs to him. The red densed stamp came down hard enough to shake the paperclip. Selby added a note to the claim file while Nora watched the cursor move across his monitor. He said the file was closed. Any resubmission without new material evidence could be flagged as attempted misrepresentation. Priya's lanyard tightened around her finger. The man by the wall turned one shoe beneath the other. The printer released a single page into an empty tray. Nora looked at the clock. The second hand passed 8. Selby kept talking. Something about procedure. Something about protecting the fund. Nora folded the denial letter once, set it on her lap, and waited until he stopped. Then she stood. Nah. A man had just turned a dead pilot into a policy exclusion and his widow into a possible fraud case. 12 feet away, 3 people heard it. Nobody moved. Put yourself in that chair. Do you keep arguing with a man who has already closed the file? Or do you walk out and start recording everything he missed? Nora walked out. Her hand touched the doorknob 41 seconds after the stamp hit the paper. In the hallway, she opened a black rubber notebook and wrote one line. 41 seconds. Then she underlined it. That evening, the denial letter lay on Nora's kitchen table beside the funeral invoices. The red stamp faced upward. Denied. She moved the sugar bowl 3 inches to the left and set the black rubber notebook in the space it left behind. The mortgage statement still leaned against the toaster. She had not opened it. Nora clicked her pen. 41 seconds. OE7. No final accident report cited. Willful deviation. Priya heard it. The last line sat alone beneath the others. Nora drew the pen back. Somewhere behind the refrigerator, the compressor kicked on, rattled twice, then settled into a low hum. OE7. She had seen language like that before. Not in Boone's file. Somewhere older. A voice over a phone. A woman asking a question nobody at the radio desk knew how to answer. The memory would not come all at once. Nora closed the notebook and pulled a grey plastic tote from beneath the coat hooks. Camas Bend had returned it 4 days after the crash. Boone Rourke had been written across the lid in black marker. One corner of the tape had collected lint from the hallway rug. She lifted the lid. His kneeboard rested on top, its elastic strap stretched pale at the edges. Beneath it sat a logbook thickened by years of paper, 2 aviation commendations folded inside a cloudy plastic sleeve, and a crew photograph taken in front of a yellow fuel truck. Boone stood in the back row. Of course he did. 3 men in front held certificates against their chests. Boone had one hand on another pilot's shoulder and the other tucked behind his back. His smile was smaller than everyone else's. Nora set the photograph aside. A pencil rolled against the bottom of the tote. Boone had sharpened it until it was barely longer than her thumb. The eraser was gone. She opened the logbook. Every flight had been entered in the same narrow hand. Date, aircraft, route, conditions, hours, no stories, no adjectives. The total on the final completed page read 9184.6. Nora checked it twice. She unfolded the commendations. One recognized Boone's work during an evacuation outside Missoula. The other cited judgment during a wind shift in Northern California. Neither had ever been framed. For years, they had lived beneath spare batteries and old maps in the bottom drawer of his desk. His current red card remained inside the folder from Selby's office. There was no second copy waiting to rescue the first. Only the logbook, the ratings, the dates. Paper that had been quiet until someone needed it to speak. Nora bent closer to the final page. The cord beneath her blouse slipped forward, and the ring threaded onto it touched the table with a small wooden click. She held still. Then she turned the page. At Camas Bend, every operational frequency was recorded during an active incident. Timestamps ran beside the audio down to the second. Nora knew the system because she had sat 6 feet from its blinking lights for 10 years. On her first morning at the radio desk, Augie Reyes had stood behind her with one hand on the back of the chair. He had been air operations chief then, broad through the shoulders, with a coffee stain on his left cuff. A trainee had missed half a call sign and tried to fill it in from memory. Augie reached over, stopped the playback, and pointed at the line of red recording lights. "On this frequency you write down everything," he said. "The tape doesn't lie. People do." Then he rewound the call. No speech. No second lesson. Just the voice again. This time heard correctly. Nora opened the notebook. Audio archive, she wrote. Below it, flight following record. The phrase OE7 kept pulling at something. She walked to the small desk near the window and opened an old directory of neighbouring helibases. 2 years earlier, a dispatcher at Elk Crossing had called during a quiet stretch between incidents. The woman's name had been Marcy. She had asked whether Nora knew where a widow could appeal an aviation claim. Teresa Dunmore. The name came back before the rest. Teresa's husband had died on contract work. Marcy had read part of the denial over the phone while Nora searched for a number. Operator error. Then an aircraft had called short final with a hydraulic warning, and Nora had put Marcy on hold. By the time the frequency cleared, the call had ended. Nora found Teresa's name in the directory margin, written beside a number that was probably no longer current. She copied it into the notebook. Then she opened the public incident summary for Ninnebark Ridge. Most of it was weather, acreage, assignments, and equipment counts. Halfway down the second page, one line stopped her. 14 hand crew members assigned to the Ninnebark West Slope. No ground fatalities. Nora read it again. Boone's aircraft had gone into the lake. 14 people had walked off that ridge. The report did not connect those facts. Neither did she. Not yet. She turned to a clean page and made a list. Certified qualification record. Dispatch audio. Flight following data. Maintenance history. Ninibak crew location. Other OE7 claims. At 11:17 that night, Nora sent a formal preservation request for Boone's operational records. The next morning, she filed separate requests as the named beneficiary and next of kin. She did not know what Boone had done in his final 20 seconds. She knew only what Selby had not done. He had never listened. For 4 days, Nora heard nothing. On the 5th, an automated reply arrived at 6:12 in the morning. Her preservation request had been received. Her beneficiary request had been routed. Her next of kin request for operational audio would be reviewed against the active investigation file. The final line was the only one written by a person. Some responsive records may be withheld until release is authorized. Nora printed the message, punched 2 holes through the top, and added it to a thin binder. She did not call anyone at Kama's Bend and ask them to bend a rule. Her operational account had been suspended the morning her bereavement leave began. She knew the login screen would still recognize her name. She also knew every access would be logged. The black rubber notebook stayed open beside the keyboard. Request sent, 11:17 p.m. Acknowledged, 6:12 a.m. No release date. She wrote the times and closed the cover. 3 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived with a green stripe across the top. Inside were 5 pages. Boone Rourke, 9,184.6 total flight hours. Current Type 1 rating. 2 federal wildfire aviation commendations. No disciplinary finding for reckless operation during the 11 years covered by the policy. Nora laid the record on the kitchen table beside Selby's denial letter. Seasonal helicopter jockey. The words looked smaller when placed next to the numbers. She did not cross them out. She did not write hero in the margin. She aligned the corners of both pages, set a paperweight over them, and went to work on the next request. The audio took longer. Kama's Bend released it 6 weeks after Selby stamped the claim. The package arrived through a secure link that expired after 72 hours. It contained an operational channel recording, a transcript, timestamps, and a flight following table with several fields blacked out. Nora waited until evening. The kitchen window had gone dark enough to reflect the room. One chair remained pushed in across from her. Boone's chair. She moved the laptop 6 inches to the left so the reflection no longer caught it. The headset covered only her right ear. At first there was rotor wash under the transmission, a thick mechanical beating that flattened the smaller sounds. A dispatcher read wind. Someone called for a bucket sequence. Static cut across half a call sign. Then Boone's voice entered. Not loud, not rushed. Going in. Keep the crew clear. The channel opened again. 47 Bravo, Kama's Bend, static. 47 Bravo, radio check. Nothing answered. Nora left her hand on the trackpad. The file continued for another 32 seconds before the next aircraft called in. She dragged the cursor back. The second time, her thumbnail pressed against the table's edge until the skin beneath it lightened. Going in. Keep the crew clear. She listened to the space after his voice. On the third pass, she removed the headset and set it beside the laptop. The ear cushion rolled once before lying flat. She walked to the sink, turned the faucet on, turned it off before the water warmed. The fourth time she opened the notebook. Voice controlled, crew referenced, exact time, 16:42:11, no distress call, no loss of speech. She stopped with the pen above the page. The recording did not tell her which crew Boone meant. It did not show where they stood. It did not prove the aircraft still answered every control input. A calm voice could exist inside a failing machine. She wrote one more line. File judged him without hearing this. Man, that is the voice they labeled uncontrolled. No screaming, no plea for help. One clear instruction, keep the crew clear. Imagine hearing the person you married disappear into static. and realizing the file that judged him had never bothered to listen. Nora played it 4 times. Then she wrote down the second. The next name in her notebook was Del Prater. He worked out of a maintenance hangar 40 miles south of Camas Bend, where the concrete apron held old oil stains shaped like islands. A yellow tug sat beneath an awning with one tire removed. Wind pushed an empty parts carton along the fence until it caught against the chain links. Del met Nora beside a metal workbench. He was 62, narrow through the chest, with safety glasses resting on his forehead and black half-moons beneath 3 fingernails. He did not offer coffee. He did not ask whether she was holding up. Nora placed Boone's aircraft number on the bench. Del looked at it. His jaw moved once before he reached for a log binder. "I signed the return to service," he said. Nora waited. Del turned pages with the side of one finger. Each page carried dates, initials, and compact blocks of maintenance language. He stopped near the middle. A pilot had reported intermittent vibration during a previous cycle. Ground checks had failed to reproduce it. Inspection showed no defect requiring removal from service. The aircraft had been released under procedure, with the note retained for monitoring. Del tapped the line with a capped pen. "This does not say the aircraft was unsafe to fly," Nora nodded. "It does not say this caused the accident." Another nod. Del looked toward the open hangar door. 2 mechanics stood beside an engine cowling. One held a socket wrench without turning it. The other studied a clipboard that had no paper clipped to it. It had not been ruled out, Del said. That was all. Nora asked whether he would provide a copy if an agency requested one. Del pulled the binder closer to his chest. For several seconds, the only sound came from the parts carton worrying the fence. "If they ask the right way," he said, "I'll answer the right way." Nora wrote the sentence down after she returned to her truck. 4 days later, a thick envelope from Selby's office arrived by certified mail. It held the original red card, copies of the denial, and a formal notice explaining the internal reconsideration process. The card lay face up this time. Boone Rourke, current through the end of fire season. Nora lifted the papers out one at a time. A yellow sticky note clung to the back of the last page. OE7. 3 claim numbers followed. Below them, in small square handwriting, check quarterly closure reports. Nora read it twice. Inside the same envelope was a copy of the internal claim note. Claimant warned that resubmission without new evidence may be treated as misrepresentation. Selby's language had not ended when Nora left the room. He had placed it in the system. The sticky note had no name. It did not need one. Nora had watched Priya write on a legal pad while her lanyard tightened around one finger. She turned the envelope over. The return label had been applied crookedly. One corner had been pressed down twice. Nora added the 3 claim numbers to her notebook. Then she wrote, "Quarterly closure reports." Who benefits from OE7? Augie Reyes lived outside Riggins in a house with a sagging porch and 3 weather instruments mounted along the roofline. A windsock hung above his shed, though no aircraft had landed there in years. He opened the door before Nora knocked. His shoulders had narrowed since Camas Bend. His hair had gone white around the ears. The coffee stain was gone from his cuff because he wore a grey t-shirt with no cuffs at all. "You brought the tape," he said. Nora held up the binder. "I brought what they released." Augie cleared one end of his dining table. A bowl of walnuts moved to the windowsill. He placed the transcript, the flight following table, the public incident map, and Boone's qualification record in 4 straight rows. He did not touch the audio first. He checked the timestamps against the coordinates. He marked each point with a soft pencil. The gaps between them were wide enough to swallow several different flight paths. Flight following was not built to reconstruct control movement second by second, he said. Nora stood on the other side of the table. Augie drew the ordinary approach line with a ruler. Then he marked the final reported point, southwest, away from the expected path. He measured again. Something changed. Drift? Could be. Control input? Could be. His pencil rested over the last point. These points cannot tell us whether the aircraft went there or Boone put it there. Nora looked at the map. The blue shape of the lake sat lower on the page. Ninebark Ridge rose above it in brown contour lines. What would tell us? Full telemetry, closer position intervals, control data if the ship carried it, exact crew coordinates. Augie set the pencil down. Not this. He played the audio. Boone's voice crossed the dining room. Augie's hand stopped beside the walnut bowl. Keep the crew clear. He did not look at Nora. When the static ended, he rewound 10 seconds and listened again. If a regulator asks me what these records do and do not show, he said, I'll answer. Will you put that in writing? Augie looked at the red card on top of the binder. Yes, the crew list led Nora to Manny Ortega. He was working a thinning operation near Garden Valley when she found him. The hand crew had broken for lunch beside a row of white transport vans. Yellow shirts hung from shoulders darkened by sweat. Someone passed a gallon jug down the line. Manny sat on the lowered tailgate of a utility truck. He was 48, compact, with a silver streak in his beard and a burn scar no wider than a shoelace crossing the back of his right hand. Nora gave him the time from the recording, 16:42:11. Manny's eyes moved past her toward the tree line. We heard him. What did you hear? Keep the crew clear. Where were you? West Slope. How many? 14. He took a folded incident map from the truck's glove box. The creases had worn white. Manny circled a position above a drainage line. The ship came in from there. His finger moved toward the ridge, then stopped. It changed. Toward the lake. I lost it behind the trees. Did you see it hit? No. Did you know what Boone intended? Manny folded the map once. No. The answer came without apology. Nora looked toward the lunch line. One firefighter had stopped chewing. Another kept both hands around the water jug. A woman near the first van turned her helmet slowly in her lap, following the scratches with her thumb. Nora asked the question differently. Why did all 14 of you walk off the ridge? Manny opened the truck door and removed a clipboard. Beneath the weather sheet was a crew roster. 14 names. He placed it across Nora's binder. Because it didn't come through us. Nora did not ask him to say more. The third claim number on Priya's sticky note belonged to Teresa Dunmore. Her current address led to a duplex outside Twin Falls with wind chimes made from old silverware. A plastic grocery bag had caught beneath the porch step and breathed in and out with the wind. Teresa opened the door wearing a red cardigan with one missing button. Nora introduced herself. At Boone's name, Teresa's fingers tightened around the edge of the door. At OE7, she let go. The denial letter was still in a kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus and expired coupons. Teresa unfolded it along creases that had gone soft, operator error, failure to maintain control. Resubmission without material evidence may result in referral for review. Different year, same architecture. Teresa set Nora's letter beside hers. For a while, neither woman spoke. A clock above the stove clicked too loudly for its size. I thought it was just hours, Teresa said. So did I. Teresa opened an old email account on a tablet with a cracked corner. One message led to another widow. That widow knew 2 contract families. One of them had kept the original denial. Another had saved only an email attachment. A third had never appealed because the warning about misrepresentation had sounded like the beginning of a criminal investigation. Teresa wrote 6 names on the back of a grocery receipt. She tore it free and pushed it across the table. Nora looked at the list. The case had started with 1 dead pilot and 1 red stamp. Now there were 7 families in the room, though only 2 chairs were occupied. Over the next 12 days, Nora and Teresa built a complaint package. Boone's certified qualification record, the operational audio and transcript, 3 comparative denial letters, Selby's internal claim note, Dell's maintenance reference described but not yet copied, Augie's written statement about the limits of the release data, Manny's crew roster and marked map, a request that the Idaho Department of Insurance preserve the quarterly closure reports, the related claim files, and the full telemetry. Nora numbered every exhibit in the lower right corner. Teresa checked the names. At 9:03 on a Monday morning, they sent the package. Nothing happened by noon. Nothing happened the next day. A week passed. Then 2. Nora returned to limited duty at Camas Bend. She answered tanker check-ins, logged wind changes, and kept Boone's audio off the work computer. No one at the radio desk asked what she had filed. One dispatcher left a fresh stack of transcript paper beside her console. Another replaced the dead bulb above position 3 without mentioning Boone's empty locker. 5 weeks after the complaint, a white envelope arrived. Idaho Department of Insurance. Nora opened it at the kitchen table with the blunt side of a butter knife. Ruth Kessler, Deputy Commissioner for Market Conduct, had signed the final page. The department had accepted the complaint for preliminary review of claim handling practices. It had issued a preservation order for identified internal records. A conference had been scheduled. No finding had been made. No claim had been reopened. At the bottom of the page, beneath the date and call-in number, one sentence had been underlined by hand. Please bring all original documents. Nora placed the letter over Selby's denial. For the first time, the red stamp disappeared beneath something else. The first person to arrive was Augie Reyes. He drove 3 hours from Riggins in a pickup with a cracked bug shield and parked beneath the cottonwoods outside Camas Bend. When Nora came through the side door, Augie was already at the conference table. His old flight bag sat in front of him, the leather dark at the corners, where his hands had carried it for years. He opened it without ceremony. Boone's certified qualification record went down first. Then the preliminary flight following map. Then a page matching every released coordinate to its timestamp. Last came a handwritten list titled, "What full telemetry must answer?" Augie signed a declaration beneath the final paragraph. The available points, it said, were too widely spaced to support a conclusion of pilot error. They showed a change in path. They did not show whether that change came from drift, mechanical failure, or deliberate control input. Nora read the signature. Augie capped his pen. The tape doesn't lie. He closed the bag and left before lunch. Del Prater's envelope arrived the next morning. Inside was a clean photocopy of the maintenance page, his signature crossing the bottom margin in blue ink. He had written the date beside it and added one sentence in block letters. The prior warning was inspected, but remained relevant information that should not have been dismissed before mechanical causes were ruled out. His name sat beneath the statement. No qualification. No request to keep him anonymous. By Friday, Manny Ortega's paperwork reached Ruth Kessler's office. A leave form covered the first page. 1 day requested during active fire season. Behind it was the Ninnebark map. 14 names ran beneath the west slope position marker, each with a signature and the same time written beside it. 1642. One signature leaned hard to the right. Another had been made in pencil. A third was no more than 2 initials and a line. No one had written hero. No one had written sacrifice. 14 people had only placed their names where they had been standing. Teresa Dunmore sent a cardboard file box sealed with 3 strips of brown tape. The first layer held 7 original denial letters. The second held 2 printed email confirmations. At the bottom were 3 sworn affidavits and a yellow legal pad listing who would appear at the hearing. Teresa had circled 3 names in red for in-person testimony. 2 others had written video beside theirs. Nora lifted each letter by its edges. OE7, operator error, failure to maintain control. The same phrases returned in different fonts, different years, different claim numbers. The box smelled faintly of basement dust. Priya's evidence never came to Nora's kitchen. It went through the department's whistleblower channel and remained under seal. Ruth Kessler later sent notice that the submission had been authenticated. It included quarterly closure dashboards, an email setting OE7 targets, a bonus table tied in part to closure rate, Boone's claim note, and internal fields identifying which files had received independent technical review. Priya's sworn declaration carried her full name. The blue lanyard did not appear anywhere in the packet. Nora still saw it tightening around her finger. 3 weeks after the preliminary conference, Kessler issued a formal order. The department had found sufficient indications of possible claim-handling misconduct to continue. The insurer was directed to produce a sample of OE7 files, the complete claim history for Boone Rourke, and any full telemetry in its possession or reasonably available to it. The department would examine whether the willful deviation exclusion had been applied before a reasonable investigation was completed. The order did not discuss probable cause. It did not declare Boone innocent. It did not call him brave. It scheduled a public administrative hearing for 61 days later. Full telemetry would be available to the parties during discovery. Nora read the order twice, then carried every document to the kitchen table. She built the timeline from left to right. 1641-58, 1642-11, 1642-18. Augie's map lay beneath the first 2 times. Boone's transcript crossed the third. Manny's crew roster touched the fourth. Beside them sat 14 signatures and 9 denial letters. The table was no longer large enough. Nora moved the sugar bowl to the counter. The funeral invoice went into a drawer. The mortgage statement remained unopened beside the toaster. She placed Selby's denial at the far end of the timeline. For months, he had been the first voice in the file. Now he would have to wait his turn. The hearing room had no windows. 2 rows of grey chairs faced a raised table beneath the seal of the Idaho Department of Insurance. A document camera sat at the center. Its white light made every sheet of paper look flatter than it was. Nora took the chair nearest the evidence table. She placed the black rubber notebook beside her right hand and Boone's red card beside it. Curtis Selby sat across the aisle with counsel from the insurer. His charcoal suit fit better than the one he had worn in his office. The same silver pen rested between his fingers. Tap. Deputy Commissioner Ruth Kessler looked over the room before she opened the record. Her glasses hung low on her nose. A stack of sample claim files stood to her left, each marked with a white numbered tab. "This proceeding will not determine the probable cause of an aviation accident," she said. "The question before the department is narrower." Her eyes moved to Selby. What reasonable basis did the claims unit have to apply a willful deviation exclusion before other possible causes had been adequately investigated? The court reporter lowered both hands to the keys. No one moved. Nora picked up Boone's card. Selby spoke before she reached the evidence table. The operator deviated from the assigned route. He said operator the way he had said it in his office. Clean, useful, without a name attached. Nora placed the card beneath the document camera. Kessler nodded to the clerk. "Mark it." The clerk slid a small exhibit label onto the lower corner. Exhibit 1. Under the camera, the card was face down. The clerk turned it over. The screen on the wall filled with Boone's photograph, his rating, the effective date, and the name printed across the top. Boone Rourke. Selby's pen touched the table. Tap. Kessler did not comment on the name. She moved to the first timeline chart. Date of accident? June 4th, the department examiner said. Date of denial? June 25th. Final aviation finding available on June 25th? No. Independent aviation technical review contained in the claim file? No. Documentation ruling out mechanical contribution? The examiner looked down at the file. Nen. Del Prater's maintenance page appeared under the camera. The previous vibration report sat midway down the sheet, surrounded by inspection notes and initials. Augie Reyes took the witness chair. He wore a dark blue shirt buttoned to the throat and held no notes in his hands. Kessler pointed to Dell's statement. Does this entry establish that a mechanical failure caused the accident? No. Does it establish that a possible mechanical issue had been reported before the accident? Yes. Had that possibility been eliminated when the claim was denied? Not in the materials I reviewed. Kessler turned to Selby. What technical finding allowed you to rule out mechanical contribution? Selby lifted the pen. The flight path was consistent with operator deviation. That was not my question. The pen came down. Tap, tap. Kessler waited. Selby's counsel leaned toward him, one hand covering the microphone between them. The attorney whispered without looking at Nora. Selby listened, then straightened the papers in front of him. There was no technical finding specific to mechanical contribution, he said. Kessler wrote one line on her pad. The audio came next. A technician dimmed the wall screen. The waveform appeared as a thin green line against black. Nora opened the notebook to the page, marked 164211. Rotor noise filled the room. A dispatcher read wind direction. Static broke across the channel. A call sign disappeared beneath it. Then Boone's voice, going in. Keep the crew clear. The signal closed. 47 Bravo, Camas Bend. Static. 47 Bravo, radio check. The technician stopped the recording before the next aircraft transmission. One of the widows in the second row lowered her head. Teresa Dunmore kept both hands around the denial letter in her lap. Manny Ortega stared at the blank screen, his forearms resting on his knees. Selby's pen did not move for 3 seconds. Then it began again. Tap. Augie leaned toward the microphone. The statement is complete and structured. The timestamp matches the aircraft's operational channel and the flight following record. What does the statement prove? Kessler asked. That the pilot was conscious enough to transmit an instruction concerning a ground crew. Does it prove he retained full control of the aircraft? No. Does it support a conclusion that he had lost all awareness? No. Nora's thumb rested on the number in her notebook. 164211. She did not look across the aisle. Kessler signaled to the technician. The wall screen changed. 3 layers appeared on the same topographic map. A black line marked Boone's assigned flight path. 14 yellow points marked the verified positions of Manny Ortega's crew on the Ninnebark west slope. A red line showed the aircraft's final path from full telemetry produced during discovery. Augie stood beside the screen with a pointer. The released flight-following data gave us only widely spaced positions, he said. This is different. These intervals are close enough to show the aircraft's movement during the final seconds. He placed the pointer over the black route. The assigned path continued toward the western shoulder. The pointer moved to the yellow points. The crew occupied this section, then to the red line. The aircraft began moving southwest. The red path curved away from the cluster. Augie advanced 1 frame. Small markers appeared along the final section. Control input data continues through this portion. Another frame. The red line cleared the yellow points and angled toward the lake below the ridge. Kessler folded her hands. Can the data establish why the pilot made the maneuver? No. Data does not establish a person's private intention. What can it establish? Augie looked at the map. The movement is inconsistent with an uncontrolled drift. The aircraft was being directed away from the crew. The room remained still. The only motion came from the red line on the wall, frozen halfway between the ridge and the water. Selby leaned toward his counsel again. His pen rolled under his palm. Kessler addressed him. Your denial identified this deviation as the act that triggered the exclusion. Yes. The aircraft did deviate. Yes. And the telemetry now shows that the deviation moved it away from 14 people. Selby's fingers closed, around the pen. The claim unit did not have this overlay at the time. The claim unit denied the claim before obtaining it. No one whispered after that. Hold on. They stamped failure to maintain control. Look at that line on the screen. Boone Rourke did leave the assigned path. He left it because 14 people were standing where the helicopter had been headed. Say that is your call sign. 1 ridge. 1 patch of open water. Seconds left. Which way do you turn? Boone turned away from the people. Manny Ortega rose when his name was called. He carried the crew map to the witness table and placed it beside Exhibit 1. 14 signatures ran beneath the position marker. Kessler asked him to state what he had personally observed. Manny kept one hand on the map. We were on the west slope. We heard the transmission. The aircraft changed away from the ridge. We lost sight of it behind the timber. Did you see the impact? No. Can you testify to what Mr. Rourke intended? No. Manny looked toward Nora for the first time. Then back to Kessler. 14 of us signed that map because 14 of us walked off that ridge. He returned to his chair. The 13 names that were not in the room remained visible under the camera. Kessler opened the first white-tabbed claim file. The hearing shifted. One accident became 29. The department's preliminary market conduct sample covered 4 years of fatal aviation claims handled by Selby's unit. 29 total. 21 closed under OE7. 18 of those 21 contained no independent aviation technical review. The denial rate before the quarterly closure dashboard had averaged 24%. 2 quarters after the target was introduced, it had reached 71%. An internal email instructed managers to improve decisive closure performance. A compensation table tied part of the unit's performance evaluation to closure rate. The numbers appeared one at a time on the wall. 24 Finchum, 71 Finchum. Selby stopped arranging his papers. Teresa stood with her denial letter in both hands. Kessler called her name. Teresa did not approach the microphone. She only held the first page high enough for the clerk to see the code, OE7. A second widow stood 3 chairs behind her. Same code. The monitor beside the witness table brightened. A woman appearing by video lifted a printed email toward the camera. OE7. No one spoke over another. Each woman added 1 document and sat down. Priya's declaration was read into the record without revealing the sealed attachments to the public screen. Employees had been directed to warn certain claimants that resubmission without new material evidence could be referred for misrepresentation review. Kessler placed Boone's internal claim note beneath the document camera. Claimant warned. The words filled the wall. Mr. Selby, she said. What regulation authorized you to characterize the exercise of an appeal right as potential misrepresentation before an appeal had been filed? Selby looked at his counsel. The attorney's hands remained folded. Selby looked at the pen. There was no specific regulation cited. Was the warning standard language? It was used where the unit believed repetitive submissions might occur. Nora Rourke had submitted 1 claim. Selby said nothing. The pen lay between his fingers. Still. Kessler removed her glasses and set them on the pad in front of her. The department is not issuing an aviation causation finding today. It is issuing preliminary findings regarding claim conduct. The court reporter's hands began moving again. The Rourke denial was entered before a reasonable investigation had been completed. A page turned in the sample stack. Material information was not considered. Another page. The exclusion was applied without an independent technical basis. Another. The comparative files indicate that the concern may extend beyond a single claim. Kessler ordered the insurer to reconsider Boone's claim. She expanded the market conduct examination to the full group of OE7 aviation fatalities. All related records, incentive communications, technical review fields, and claimant warning notes were to remain preserved. Selby's counsel wrote quickly. Selby did not. The clerk began reading the exhibit list into the record. Exhibit 1. The room waited. Current pilot qualification card of Boone Rourke. Nora lowered her eyes to the black notebook. For months, the file had called him the operator. The record had finally said his name. 3 months after the hearing, a white envelope arrived at Nora's house, with the insurer's return address in the upper left corner. October rain tapped the kitchen window. The sugar bowl sat near the stove now, leaving the center of the table clear. Nora opened the envelope with the same butter knife she had used on Ruth Kessler's first letter. The decision ran 6 pages. The willful deviation exclusion was withdrawn. The denial was reversed. The policy would pay DOLA $480,000, plus interest accrued during the delay. Nora read the amount once. Then she turned back to the paragraph above it and read Boone's name. Not the operator. Boone Rourke. The funeral invoice had remained in the drawer beneath the dish towels. Nora took it out, flattened the curled corner, and placed it beside the new letter. She did not hold the check up for a photograph. There was no photograph. The money did not make the empty chair less empty. It paid what the contract had promised to pay. Nothing more, nothing less. In December, the Department of Insurance released the market conduct examination. The report was thick enough to keep the kitchen door from closing. All 21 aviation claims coded OE7 were ordered into review. 17 were formally reopened. Over the next 9 months, 12 denials were reversed. The letters went to houses Nora had never seen. A ranch outside Pocatello, an apartment above a laundromat in Boise, a trailer at the edge of an airfield where a woman had kept every premium receipt in a biscuit tin. Together, the corrected benefits and interest reached $3.8 million. The insurer paid $650, $0 administrative penalty. Its aviation claims unit entered 3 years of regulatory supervision with quarterly audits and mandatory technical review sampling. The dashboard that had rewarded closure rates disappeared from the office system. The final report did not call it evil. It called it an incentive structure that encouraged premature claim closure before material evidence had been evaluated. Curtis Selby's name appeared twice. Once beside the unit he had directed. Once beside the sentence stating that his employment had been terminated following the insurer's internal review. The department opened a separate professional license examination. It announced no criminal charge. It promised no prison term. Selby simply stopped occupying the chair from which he had closed other people's files. Man. One notebook opened the first file. Then a mechanic signed his name. A retired air chief brought the map. 14 firefighters gave up a day in fire season. A claims employee risked her job, and widows who had been told to go home stood up together. That is how a stamp becomes a system, and how a system finally gets forced to look back. Teresa Dunmore received her new decision on a Tuesday afternoon. She opened it inside her car outside a grocery store, the engine off and a bag of frozen peas softening on the back seat. 2 years earlier, a denial letter had told her the case was closed. The new letter used different words. Prior decision reversed. Benefits approved. Interest included. Teresa placed the letter face up on the passenger seat. Her old denial lay beneath it, inside a worn brown envelope. She rested both hands on the steering wheel. People pushed carts past the windshield. A boy in a red jacket dropped an orange, chased it under a parked truck, and came back holding it above his head. Teresa remained there until the automatic lights outside the store came on. Priya stayed. The claims unit moved to another floor after the restructuring. The grey desks were replaced, but the vending machine followed them upstairs. Its screen still went dark between purchases. On Priya's first fatal aviation file under the new procedure, she read the preliminary claim note twice. Then she removed the blue lanyard from around her neck and placed it straight across the desk. No loops around her finger, no knots. A drop-down menu waited on her monitor. Operator error alleged. Technical basis pending. Priya selected. Independent technical review required. She attached the conflicting maintenance report and sent the request forward. The claimant never knew Priya's name. That was all right. Nearly 1 year after the hearing, the department completed public review of a new agency rule. It was called the Boone Rourke Independent Review Standard. The name appeared at the top of the final document in plain black type. Before an insurer could deny a fatal aviation claim based on operator error, reckless operation, or willful deviation, the file now required an independent aviation technical review. Conflicting material evidence had to be addressed in writing. Claimants could not be threatened merely for appealing. Every denial had to identify the technical records used to support it. At Karma's Bend, Nora printed the standard and placed it inside a clear sleeve. The document was not a monument. It was a procedure someone would have to follow on an ordinary Tuesday when another name appeared on another form. Boone's claim had begun with one stamp. It ended with 17 reopened files. The system had looked back. Now it had rules for looking first. 1 year after the hearing, Karma's Bend opened its new dispatch room 3 days before fire season. There was no ribbon across the door, no television crew. 2 dispatchers brought grocery store cookies. 4 members of the Ninibak crew stood near the back wall in clean yellow shirts. Teresa Dunmore arrived carrying nothing but her purse, and the new letter she still kept folded inside it. Nora stood beside the call sign board. The room smelled of fresh paint, warm electronics, and coffee already burned down to the bottom of the pot. A round clock hung above position 3. Its red second hand crossed 12 and continued without sound. A small glass frame had been mounted beside the board. Boone's red card stood upright inside it. The name, rating, and expiration date faced the room. No denial letter covered them. No hand could turn the card face down without first opening the glass. The plaque beneath it read, Boone Rourke 9184, flight hours Camas Ben below that, in smaller type. Boone Rourke Independent. Review standard. Nora did not make a speech. She opened the black rubber notebook and read the names of the 12 claimants whose denials had been reversed, one name at a time. After each one, a young dispatcher marked the file closed for payment rather than closed for denial. Teresa stood with both hands around a paper cup. Manny Ortega watched the call sign board. The scar across his right hand had faded to a thin white line. When Nora finished, the room stayed quiet long enough for the ventilation fan to click on. A new dispatcher pointed to the map displayed beside Boone's card. The final flight path curved away from Ninibak Ridge and bent toward the lake. Why does the line turn there? She asked. Nora placed one fingertip on the point where the path left the ridge. That was all. They called it a loss of control. It was the most controlled thing he ever did. The young dispatcher took her seat. She adjusted the headset over one ear, opened a fresh log, and looked up at the clock. The red hand moved across the face. Nora waited until the others had gone. Then she stood alone beneath Boone's name and touched the cord under her blouse. The wedding ring threaded onto it rested against her fingertip for 1 second. She let it fall back beneath the fabric. Who is the operator in your life? The person reduced to a label before anyone bothered to hear the tape. Tell us the city you're watching from, and the name of someone who deserved to be heard. Share this story with the person standing in front of a stamp that looks final. Subscribe and turn on the bell for more stories about the people others judged too quickly. Some files are not closed, they are waiting to be heard.